If you've ever summoned for help in multiplayer during a boss fight and died within seconds of starting the fight, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Welcome back YouTube to another Elden Ring guide. Summons in game can really make boss fights more manageable, and I highly recommend them for newer players. Some of your more Gucci players hate on people using summons because it makes the game a little bit easier, but who cares? Play the game like you want to. I'm sure if you've been playing for a while now, you've found that there are lots of different summoning options out there that have different advantages to each use. In this video though, we're going to take a look at some of the more OP and meta summon options you have out there and where to get them. Please note that I will be talking about some quest lines, so spoilers may come up, so if you want to totally go in fresh, you may want to stop the video now. A great budget beginner option you can get pretty early game is the Banished Knight Oleg. Oleg is an early game summon that you can get by defeating an ulcerated tree spirit deep within Fringe Folk Hero's grave. You will be required to use 2 Stone Sword keys to unlock access to Hero's grave, but you can generally find or buy Stone Sword keys as you play through the game fairly easily. Fair warning, the puzzle in the Hero's grave is an absolute pain in the ass dealing with the damn chariot. In this area, you can also get the Erd Tree's Favor Talisman, which I heavily recommend for a new player. To get the Erd Tree Favor Talisman, drop to the right side of the skinny ramp or to the left side to continue finding Oleg's ashes. Note you can come back to this area, so it's not an either or kind of thing. Continue working your way through the area and you'll finally come to the ulcerated tree spirit. Once they're defeated, you can get the Banished Knight Oleg ashes. Oleg is a beast and can dish out some serious damage while being very tanky as well. One of the better parts about Oleg is that to be able to summon him, you only need 100 FP, so it's a little bit more manageable for a newer player. One thing I could not find out is Oleg's lore as to why he was actually banished. I'm curious if you guys know anything about it because I haven't been able to find anything yet. The next option isn't as beginner friendly, but it's still relatively simple and doesn't require any super difficult boss fights. But the dreaded Dung Eater is next. Now you can lock yourself out of being able to get Dung Eater as a summon, specifically if you go down one of the quest lines too far. I'm not going to specifically spell out the details on how to unlock Dung Eater as a summon because it's very nuanced and sort of detailed, and there's a lot of other better sources out there than me turning this video into one of those. But very, very high level, you start Randy's questline and Learning of the Lakes without passing a certain point, then jump over to Dung Eater's questline. This is not as beginner friendly as it requires you to reach the royal capital, but as long as you're following a guide, it's pretty straightforward. After a lot of exhausting dialogue options and running back and forth, you should without too much struggle have Dung Eater ashes, which cost roughly 118 FP to summon, which is a little bit more than Oleg, but still not too bad. He's super tanky, procs bleed, and can aggro for some of you magic and dex players out there. Now the best part of getting Dung Eater as a summon is that you basically get to enslave arguably the biggest piece of shit character in game. For those curious about how Dung Eater got his name, he's murdered and cursed thousands of people and defiled their corpses. To what level of defiling is a mystery, but judging from his name, one can only guess that either involves eating ass or feces, which either way is vile, especially once you consider that when people die, they relieve all bodily functions, aka shit themselves. Regardless, I'm more than happy to have Dung Eater do my dirty work fighting the bosses. The next option is by far the most difficult option, as you have to complete the Ronnie questline to have access to the area that this summon is found in, but Black Knife Tish is another one of my best recommendations. Now thankfully to unlock Tish, it's not as nuanced as unlocking Dung Eater, as you don't have to follow specific steps in order to not lock yourself out of it. Once you've actually unlocked the area at the end of Ronnie's questline, all you really have to do is enter Ringleader Evergoal and defeat Electo Black Knife Ringleader, who is actually the mother of Tish. Tish was killed protecting her mother as they fled the royal capital after assassinating Godwin the Golden. The fight itself is pretty tough, and for those of you who rely on summoning, you may struggle even further since you cannot summon NPCs or any friends. Thankfully though, there is kind of a cheese if you want to go that route. Now talking about Tish as an actual summon, she is an absolute beast against solo bosses, and her flame attack does heavy amounts of damage. Plus, she has a debuff that can remove roughly 10% of the boss's health temporarily. It really makes tanky boss fights easier, especially once you've gotten her summon upgraded. The con is that it requires 132 FP to summon Tish, which for a new character that's not spec'd as magic may struggle to get to that while balancing between the other more useful stats. The other big con I kind of briefly touched on earlier is that you have to follow Ronnie's questline to the very end, which also requires you to defeat many bosses and push through a bit more harder areas, so it's not very beginner friendly. Now the final option we'll be looking at, and this is probably one of the more popular options that you see posted a lot more online, but But this is the Mimic Summon, which summons a literal mimic of yourself that instead of using FP, actually uses health. The only thing that you want to make note about using the Mimic is that if your build is bad and you're a relatively newer player and don't really have a good build, then your summon will be bad as well. I'd highly recommend this for more advanced players than beginner players. Personally, I don't use the Mimic because, in my opinion, you want a summon that will play to your weakness, so while summoning a powerful version of yourself is definitely a good idea, it may be easier to use a summon that will complement your playstyle. You can find the Mimic Tear Ash in a chest locked behind an imp statue door in the Knight's Sacred Ground. You will be in this area as you're going through the Ronnie questline to unlock Tish, so you might as well grab it while you're there. My final note on kind of all that we just talked about, if you're a total beginner, I would definitely recommend trying to grab Banished Knight Oleg first, and then trying to unlock one of the others depending on your playstyle. For example, if you're using a bleed build, I definitely recommend getting Dung Eater so you can proc bleed that much faster. Or if you're playing a more tanky build, then Tish would be a great option because she's more of a high damage, less aggro type of summon. There's certainly lots of other options out there. These are just a few of the most OP meta summons in my opinion. Who would you add to this list? I'd love to hear your suggestions, or if you agree or disagree with any of the summons that I mentioned before. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the comments section below. See you next time, YouTube.